Look at that thing. Look at that thing. It's here. After like 13 years, 11 years, whatever it is. So, let's talk about it. Jay Electronica, a written testimony. If you were to ask someone who was very much aware of the rap landscape in 2007, 8, or 9, ask them who has the most potential to drop a classic debut album, most likely their answer would be Jay Electronica. His debut EP, Act 1, was a pretty big success on MySpace when that was a thing, propelling him into the spotlight, making him more well-known, then releasing the Exhibition C single that made him even more well-known, signed on to Rock Nation in 2010, and yeah, it's been like 10 years. Where the hell has this thing been? A long time coming, and highly anticipated are understatements, because this is one of the most highly anticipated debut rap albums ever, period. More anticipated than Chance the Rapper's debut album, more anticipated than Jesus is King or most any Kanye West album, and that's kind of debatable, but honestly, at this point, anything can happen, right? Anything can happen. Tupac can rise from the dead, put out another classic album, maybe Lauryn Hill might put out her sophomore album, who knows? But up until this point, a Jay Electronica album was practically a myth. Critics and fans alike were not anticipating for him to follow up his Exhibition C single or his Act 1 EP. So when he announced on Twitter on February 7th that in 40 days his album would be out, we weren't anticipating it. It was actually released a little bit earlier since the listening parties were postponed, rather canceled, because of the coronavirus outbreak. So then there was a listening party on YouTube, streamed live on Jay Electronica's channel, and then the album was released. On Tidal. No, I did not get a free 30-day subscription just to listen to this thing, and then figured out that it was on Audio Mac for free. Yeah, you know, when you just wait for things, they sometimes happen to fall in your lap. And if I just waited a little bit longer, this would have been released on Spotify. But now I have a free 30-day subscription to Tidal, so that's fine. And initially listening to this album on Tidal, I thought the quality of it was really poor. Like, I was like, what the hell is the mixing on this thing? But listening to it on other platforms, it just seems to be that I have a very poor subscription on Tidal. Before I jump the gun on this thing, let's talk about what the album has to offer. 10 tracks, 39 minutes. I think this is a perfect runtime for a debut album, for Jay Electronica specifically. It showcases his capabilities as an artist. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It doesn't feel like it takes an eternity to finish. The longest song on here is the track Ezekiel's Wheel, which is 6 minutes long, but even then, this is one of the better cuts, in my opinion. And if you were looking at the track listing on Spotify, or Audio Mac, or even Tidal, you will notice something that's quite deceiving. It says that there are 3 featured artists. Technically 2, but The Dream is on 2 tracks on this album. The other being Travis Scott on the song The Blinding. But in reality, every song except the first track and the 8th track feature guest verses from Jay-Z. And there is a great tweet done by Hip Hop by the Numbers, I'm going to put it up on the screen, that shows how many verses each artist had. Well, rather, Jay-Z and Jay Electronica had. So Jay Electronica had 11 verses and a total of 266 bars on the album, having 52% of the words on the album. Jay-Z had 6 verses with 186 bars, which makes up about 35% of the album. This is bordering on a collaborative album, alright? This is basically Watch the Throne 2. I'm not the only one noticing that similarity. It was trending on Twitter. It's kind of upsetting that Jay Electronica does not have that many verses on this album. Surely 11 verses is a lot. 266 bars is a lot, specifically 2,530 words on this album, but Jay-Z has a little more than half of that. Again, I wanted more Jay Electronica on this album rather than Jay-Z, this does not feel like a fully fleshed out Jay Electronica project. However, I think what Jay-Z delivers on this album is good, consistent quality. Very rarely does Jay-Z falter on this album. There is one song in particular that I think everyone kind of faltered on. I will get to that song when I get to it. But the lyricism on this album consistently is quality. The lyrics are consistently referencing Islam and the religion of Islam, which Jay Electronica is a member of. He's also a member of the Nation of Islam. No surprise that there are excerpts from speeches done by the leader of the Nation of Islam, Louis Farrakhan. God damn it, Farrakhan. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I do have to point out that this leader, Louis, has had a troubled past. Allegations of anti-Semitism or sexism. I would kind of argue he's a questionable figure in religion, but I'm not pointing this out to say that Jay is in the wrong here. I just want to point that out because I think it's kind of important. Either way, I'm not begrudging Jay Electronica for believing what he believes in. I have my beliefs, whether it be politically or morally. His beliefs are shown in spades on this album. And his lyricism is one thing that I really do admire across this entire album. And Jay's lyricism too. Jay-Z's lyricism. There are elements of this record in the lyrics that kind of read off more like a, hey, come join us, rather than let me express what I feel about my religion. I don't want to say it's shoving this message down our throats because I volunteered to listen to this album, but it does feel at odds with some of the things that Jay says on this album. Moving that out of the way, kind of just addressing that small criticism I have with the lyrics, there are some amazing highlights. Like on the song Ghost of SOULJA Slim, on verse 2 we have Jay saying, "From a hard place and a rock to the rock nation of Islam, I emerge on the wave that title made to drop bombs. I came to bang with the scholars, and I bet you a Rothschild I get a bang for my dollar. The synagogue of Satan want me to hang on my collar." Some damn good wordplay. I will say that. The wordplay on this album and the lyricism on this album is great. Pretty consistent too. There are moments lyrically that make me question what's going on, however. For example, the featured artists that are billed on this album, Travis Scott and The Dream, have very scant verses. Travis Scott repeats these 3 lines throughout most of the chorus on the song. The Dream adds only a bridge to the track Shiny Suit Theory, and a pre-chorus to the song Ezekiel's Wheel. It really does confuse me why these 2 artists are billed on the album with this little in the way of material, when Jay-Z is across this entire album, and not once is he mentioned. I don't know, what happens at Rock Nation is, I guess, confusing. Maybe from someone that doesn't have much of an insider perspective on what goes on, this might seem normal to some people. There are moments on this album where Jay Electronica kneecaps himself on the lyric front. For example, I'm going to show up this lyric in the middle of Jay saying some very interesting stuff. He does this humming or this moaning kind of thing. It completely ruins what he was saying, because now I can't get that idea of him humming or moaning out of my mind. It was just too much of a distraction for me to look at what he's saying or to hear what he's saying. It was just something that I found to be a little thankless. But that's not the main issue with this album, however. The main issue I have with this album, personally, is the production on some tracks. And unfortunately, the production on the tracks that I have a problem with all come from Jay Electronica. To point to the song that I was kind of alluding to earlier, Flux Capacitor, what the hell is this song? The mixing on this song is horrible. Even after listening to it on Tidal, and it was worse on Tidal, by the way. Audiomack had it way better, but even then, the mixing was just god-awful. This doesn't sound like a Jay Electronica beat, it sounds more like 15-year-old producer from Atlanta type beat. It is messy the production, every single instrument's just mixed way too highly, and Jay-Z delivers one of his most thankless performances on this entire record. What is this chorus, Jay? What is this chorus? It might be catchy, but I'm not grabbing anything from this song in particular. I do like this line that Jay-Z says, "You backstabber's gonna turn me back to the old Jay. He's not who you wanna see. He's not as sweet as the old Ye." But other than that moment, this song very rarely has a moment where I'm thinking, yeah, the lyrics, great, wow. Again, few moments on this song in particular, because the rest of the song is just kind of bogged down by this horrible chopped and screwed Rihanna sample. The last 30 seconds of the song and a beat switch sound fine, but this song as a whole is just an utter mess. The worst song on here, easily by a mile. There are also moments on some other songs like The Ghost of SOULJA Slim, as well as Shiny Suit Theory, where there are these children vocal samples. You know the vocal sample, the yay sample that's used in like YouTube videos. If you can look past this yay vocal sample from children, the songs that have them are actually really good. Speaking of good, let's talk about the good on this album. I like the way this album opens up with a stringed back introduction track that again features the excerpt from Louis Farrakhan. Never pronounce that name properly. There are also some really interesting boom bap elements on this album too, like on the song Ghost of SOULJA Slim. And while this isn't the most experimental album I've heard in a while, I do like the track Ezekiel's Wheel. It has this nice clicking sample that's worked into a beat. I like that electric guitar that's worked onto the track The Neverending Story. It's also really cool to hear Jay-Z rap over an Alchemist beat, not gonna lie. There are moments on this album where the production can feel a little campy, a little theatrical. They do work in Jay Electronica's benefit, however. Kind of feels like he's saying something, almost like a proclamation of some sorts. More or less, he comes off like a dejected philosopher, kind of reading off of a scripture. He is very talented lyrically, however, I definitely think the production bogs this album down a lot more than it should. Still, I think the saving grace of this album is also the brevity of this album. 39 minutes, 10 tracks. And while I do find highlights on this album, there are just few too many problems with it for me to love this project. I understand why people like it. I understand why people are excited for this album. And I understand why people enjoy it. And I'm not going to begrudge you for liking or loving this album. I just hope you don't begrudge me for not liking or loving this album as much as you do. So, pretty moderate B- is what I'm feeling on this album. However, I am curious to know what are your thoughts and opinions on this album down below. Let me know what albums you want me to review next. That is it. Leave a like, comment, share, do whatever you want. Let me know how I can improve future videos down below. Remember, this is only my opinion because music is subjective.